Привіт, Оль. Радий тебе бачити. Будемо починати.
Привіт.
Якщо що, то даю тобі на всякий випадок хост. Пускаю всіх.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning. Hello, everyone. Nice to see you. We are going to be starting in a couple of seconds, waiting for everyone to join. And meanwhile, I will start my presentation to be showing it full screen. Okay. So hello, everybody. My name is Roman Grunishin, and I am going to be speaking to you today about the situation in Ukraine. First of all, about the war. Secondly, about the agricultural season. Please turn off your microphones so that we do not have any sounds in the background. Thirdly, we will speak about a very important topic, which is vital for farmers, for agricultural producers and traders worldwide, which is Ukrainian export, and how we are moving forward, opening the gate, so to say, for this export. And of course, we will mention our establishment and our success in the program project named World to Rebuild Rural Ukraine. And we will tell a few words about this project and how you can help. Today we will have an interesting talk with the Vice CEO of the railway, Vitaly. He is going to be Valery. I'm sorry. He is going to be to talk to us about all the details in the current export situation. And finally, at the end of today's meeting, approximately in 90 minutes from now, we will have the first presentation, a detailed presentation on a production cycle and everything about the wheat production in Ukraine, starting from the seeding, from the actual planting and technology of planting, and finishing the export and the processing of the wheat. However, before we start, I would like to ask you for the minute of silence in order to commemorate those people who died recently in two terroristic and terrible attacks, the civil people in Kremenchuk and in Odessa region. The second attack happened this night, and it is already known that at least 18 people died, almost approximately the same amount that died in the mall attack last, seems to me, Wednesday, if I'm not mistaken, which was, or Tuesday, a couple of days ago in Kremenchuk. So let's take a moment of silence in order to commemorate those civil people who gave their lives for nothing, just because someone decided to attack their life. Okay, so we will proceed right now. There were some technical moments I needed to update the link. So first of all, let me remind, my name is Roman Grunishin and I'm the CEO of the company Travelite Agro. However, since the war started, we have moved to a charity or volunteer project named World to Rebuild Rural Ukraine, and we devote all our time right now to facilitating this project, to spreading the information about our situation in Ukraine with war and with the damages to the rural areas and to the homes and small production facilities of the smallest agricultural producers. So first of all, the current war situation in Ukraine. The hottest place is, of course, the east. And here, Russian troops, they're trying to encircle our troops in this region. Unfortunately, they forced our troops to retreat from Severodonetsk, and now they are proceeding. There is a serious threat that they might encircle our troops. However, I've listened to the podcast of one of those who were in these areas, and he said that the reason why our troops retreated were to save lives, and the on the opposite, on the contrary, the motivation of Russian troops is minimal. And now that we retreated, we please turn off the microphones. Whoever is using it, yeah, okay, yeah. So they continue to attack our positions. They have more the dominance in artillery and in the number of soldiers. Their motivation is much lower than Ukrainian soldiers' ones. And now that our soldiers have retreated, they will have a possibility to reorganize. And with a new attack, they consider more successful moving forward into these positions once they are better prepared. So our positions remain under the constant shelling. However, they are very well motivated and they do not doubt in the victory. Also, there is the short, so here is a more detailed map. So Severodonetsk, Lysychansk, that is just right now that they are retreating from Lysychansk slowly, I mean Ukrainian forces, and Russians, they, as I was showing, try to encircle them here. But again, would like to mention that their soldiers are very poor, ill-motivated. Of course, there is a problem here in Kharkiv, because now that they proceed towards occupying this southern part of Kharkiv Oblast, here it is I'm showing, they can attack our second biggest city in Ukraine from the south. And there were a lot of shellings. There have been huge amounts of shellings of this city in the last 2 weeks. Okay, so another threat that is coming from the north, and we know that Belarus has been providing their airplane landing lines and their military bases for Russian troops, but Russian president is forcing Belarusian self-declared president to enter the war with Belarusian troops. However, what we are seeing here, Belarusian troops are giving off the weapon to the Russian troops. That means that they are not going to fight. However, they are running the trainings of their troops at the border with Ukraine, which means the opposite. So they are playing two scenarios at the same time. Which of those scenarios they will finally choose, no one knows so far. But according to the official position of our Ministry of Defense, the military danger of them coming from the north persists. I can speak for the areas here in the northwestern part of Ukraine. I have people, relatives who live there, and they said that all these forests, and this is a very highly forestry region, are mined by Ukrainian troops. People are not allowed to go into the woods. And once the car driving in one of those roads stops by the side of the road, Ukrainian troops come over and ask, what are you doing here? Please leave, it is dangerous. So it means, and the farmers here say that the control is huge, the preparation is huge, and if Belarusians or Russian troops start coming from the north, they will be greeted respectfully, so to say, as they deserve. One of the successes of the recent days is the island in the northwest part of Black Sea named Zmiyny or Snake Island. That island is has been always the Ukrainian territory, and it allows to control the paths of the ship to Odessa port. These passes right now, they are very important from the standpoint of view of transportation of grain. And of course, these passes are allowing to control or to secure the Odessa region from the attacks from Black Sea. Of course, it doesn't consider the missiles that can reach any territory of Ukraine. However, the troops, the paratroops that might land from those territories are not able to come over to Odessa if we control this island, at least if this island is unoccupied as it is right now. Russia have, after Ukrainians shelled it, by the way, with the Ukrainian artillery, the same diameter size of the bullets as the NATO standard 155. They shelled with the Bogdana. This is the name of the artillery, the only unit that has been made in Ukraine, but is very successful. There were a lot of political struggling to start building it in big numbers, but as it turned out, Ukraine has had a lot of spies, so to say, and people from the Russian influence in our government, and they were creating the bad background for this Bogdana to start being built in the series, like the construction for the army in a huge number of those units. Therefore, we've successfully built only one so far, but I'm sure that with this successful usage of it at the Zmiyny Island or Snake Island, it will start to be built in larger numbers. So these are the numbers, the official numbers from Ukrainian side about Russia's total losses. It is hard to say whether how accurate they are, but we know that Russian soldiers are even left in the fields in the fighting fields, and a lot of the bodies are still not picked up and are unidentified. Therefore, it is hard to say these days, but these are the numbers that Ukrainian Ministry of Defense are publishing every day. And of course, there are other units. Exceptional proudness of Ukrainian army brings the 14 warships sunken by the country who do not own navy, which is Ukraine. So Russian even flagship was sunken by Ukrainian artillery and Ukrainian missiles from the land. So here are the strikes, airstrikes, the map of airstrikes coming toward Ukrainian territory from various sides. As it has been officially stated, Russian airplanes, they take off on the territory of Russia. They fly towards the border between Belarus and Ukraine, set off the missiles air to ground, turn around and return back. They do it because Ukrainian anti-airplane system works very well. Our anti-missile system is successful approximately by 30 to 45%. That's excluding Kyiv, because, for example, out of 14 rockets, missiles that they launch, we succeed intercepting about 4. That's the rough statistics. It's totally my understanding of things. And in some places it is better, in some places, in some cities it is worse, unfortunately. But you see, there is no place in Ukraine that is purely safe. And the recent attacks towards civil objects, both in Kharkiv Oblast, in Kremenchuk, in Odessa, and Mykolaiv, unfortunately, are proving this fact. This is one of the attacks that happened in Kyiv just a couple of days ago in the morning. That is the usual time they pick up for attacking civil objects. These rockets strike the upper 3 levels of the multiple-story building, and of course there were people there during the attack. As it turned out, the most who suffered were one family. The wife is Russian, so she is holding Russian passport. Ukrainian husband unfortunately died. Her daughter and herself are in hospital. That day, Ukraine had 46 missiles within 24 hours. One of the missiles hit the kindergarten, and right now the kindergartens and schools are empty, but according to our Ministry of Education, they say that we plan to start start the school year 1st of September offline. After this attack, I think they might reconsider this decision. Rivne Oblast is located in the north, a little bit to the west, but mainly central north part of Ukraine. It is bordering with Belarus, and Sarny used to have, this is the town in this oblast, used to have a military base in the Soviet times. However, right now that base is not that significant, and I'm not even sure that it was existing. With the missiles that Russians are using that miss the targets, they are shelling different objects, civil objects. In this case, it was the car service station, of course, functioning in that moment, and 3 people unfortunately died. Now we are approaching the worst tragedy, actually second worst right now, unfortunately. Tragedy in Kremenchuk. It happened in the daytime when the missile hit a mall, a trading center, with the supermarket. People came there, and there were a lot of. I've read the testimonies of those who were there. There were a lot of pregnant women. There were a lot of people inside with children. At least 1,000 people were inside when the missile hit this mall, and more than 20 people were killed, from 18 to 20, but there are still a lot missing. Just this morning, I read that there were body parts found of 28 different people, unfortunately. So there will be coming more casualties, death casualties, as they proceed to tackle and to in search operation for those under the debris of the building. Mykolaiv is one of the cities, the port city, and you know that Mykolaiv has the second biggest port in Ukraine. Russians have not succeeded to occupy the port, but this port is located on the Dnieper River. Therefore, they this is what they have been doing recently. If they cannot occupy, they destroy the objects or the towns or in this case the cities with the missiles and with artillery. So Mykolaiv is suffering a lot of every day, unfortunately, a lot of attacks from the south, from Kherson Oblast, and from the east. This is the today's morning situation. It was the attack in Odessa Oblast, Bilgorod-Dnistrovsk region. Russians attacked the resort base where there were people, and right now it is unconfirmed yet, but at least 18 people were killed, including children. But the work of the special of emergency troops is still continuing, so there might be more. And that is Odessa. That is, as they claimed, revenge for the Snake Island, which Russian troops had to leave. Of course, they do not forget about targeting the strategic bridges and strategic infrastructure objects. And in this case, it is the Cherkasy city bridge over Dnieper River. This bridge is connecting two banks of the river right in the city of Cherkasy, which is the capital of Cherkasy Oblast, the region. And of course, it has been very heavily used by the both military purposes, for the military purposes, and of course for the export of grains and export and supply of the inputs to the eastern part. So quite an important artery, transportation artery. About the situation in the occupied regions, it hasn't changed the tactics or the things that Russian troops do in the occupied regions, which is Kherson, part of Zaporizhia, and Donetsk. They are looting and taking over the businesses from the local owners of the business. And in this case, the dealership of John Deere, and we know that there was already a case at the beginning of the war when Russian troops have stolen a number of John Deere equipment, which was later located in Chechnya. Now they have taken over the whole business of John Deere dealership. And the same owners are proved to be dealing with the selling of the stolen grain. So you see, they have started to build business on this war in the southern regions. Now we are shifting to the planting season. You know that Ukrainian farmers, disregarding the danger, they went into the fields and did what they could in terms of planting. Of course, they needed to reconsider the planting maps and the acreage for each of the crops because of the market situation, because of the situation of lack of inputs. And as a result, here's what we have. The numbers of acres of corn, which is a spring crop, have been decreased in 1 million hectares. You can imagine 1 million hectares. This is 2.5 million acres. With 200 bushels of corn, you can imagine how much less there will be corn supplying to the market. Instead, we have planted a lot of spring wheat acres, because wheat is lesser in the volume after it is harvested. It requires less inputs like fertilizers, and it is consumed by human. Therefore, it can be sold in Ukraine, in Ukrainian local market. Soybeans, the acreage hardly changed. It is also a spring crop, so it remained pretty much the same as in last year. Harvest of the crops this season can be around 65 million tons. of grains and oilseeds. That here we are speaking about the fall harvest. However, what we have for the next season winter planting, and I will speak more in details here, but with inability to export and with lack of all the inputs, farmers in, for example, the occupied oblasts, first of all, knowing that once they have the combine coming into the field to harvest these winter crops that are already there and that already must be harvested, they might lose their machinery, because Russian troops, they are everywhere, they're monitoring, and there is a very questionable season whether to harvest or not in the occupied areas. In the areas which are unoccupied but have been shelled or have been in active war zone, there is also a so to say Russian roulette for the farmers whether to harvest or not winter wheat and winter crops, because they are not sure that there is no explosive, there are no mines in the fields. And that is another problem that will pertain for years in Ukraine, to check the fields for the mines and for the cluster, for the elements of the cluster bombs. So, okay. Now about animals losses. Of course, the animal production and the animal products production industry depend heavily upon the supply of the grains to feed the animals. Therefore, there have been calculations of the losses to the animal industry. And at the beginning of the war, we know that Chernobyevka, this is the small town close to Kherson Oblast, which was a strategic point for Russian troops in occupying Kherson Oblast. There was a poultry factory which had 4 million chickens, and due to constant shellings and fighting in the area, their supply of water and electricity was shut down. Therefore, all the chicken died. Of course, there have been cases when Russians simply shut down the animals. For example, the cows in Kharkiv Oblast, also at the beginning of the war, they came into the dairy farm, which was one of the most modern ones, and they simply destroyed all the herd. The other herds were suffering due to the lack of the inputs, so dying from starvation or inability to be cured from the standpoint of the illnesses. And of course, the quality of their life has reduced, which also influenced their health. So here are the losses of the animals. 92,000 of cattle. Mind that Ukraine is not very self-sufficient in the dairy production, and now we have even reduced their numbers of heads. Just to remind you, about 60% of the animal of the milk is coming from small people's households, which means that in the villages, people hold every second, maybe third household has a cow or two to supply their needs and to sell the milk to the processing facilities. The remaining 40% are produced by the big farms. The sheep and goats have lost 42,000. Of course, pigs have suffered, and poultry. Poultry, over 5 million of heads of chicken. This is the dairy map, so to say, of Ukraine. And as you can see, the regions which are under the active war zone, they supply about 42% of milk. That is including both the farms and the households. In our project World to Rebuild Rural Ukraine, we are focusing on the aid to rebuild the production premises and the houses of these small farming households throughout all the territories that have been under occupation. And they have suffered not less than the cities, unfortunately, but we will talk about them more in details later. And of course, the milk yields have been reduced radically because of lack of the proper nutrition. In Mariupol, I know there is a farm very close to Mariupol, which wasn't able to supply the milk to the city even in March, when Mariupol was encircled by Russian troops. Meanwhile, the people inside the city were dying from starvation and from the lack of water. But the farm had to pour the milk into the field. The cows needed to be milked, but there was no market for this milk. This is the approximate assessment of the losses from the war to Ukrainian agricultural industry. It was done by Ministry of Agriculture, Agrarian Policy and Food of Ukraine. So it is calculating $4.3 billion, but this is just the direct losses. Of course, the infrastructure, the marketing and processing industry of the agriculture is very closely connected to agricultural industry. And if we calculate everything all together, according to United Nations Association, it can reach up to $199 billion, but it is very hard to calculate right now when the war is still in active phase. This is the structure of the losses, and you see that the crops and the actual land, the farmland, is about a half. All the rest of the losses have been done to the machinery, storages, and animals. But the land and the crops, they've been targeted as the priority by this war, as it turned out. So here is a short breakdown on the losses or damages due to the war. This slide here is in Ukrainian. I will translate it for you. So total it is $23.3 billion, and that's of 9th of June at the beginning of the last month. So here is the less production in crop production. So the decrease in crop production. So these are the numbers of wheat, corn, barley, sunflower, small grains, the horticulture, berries, and other crops in billions of dollars. Here we see the animal production. This is the cattle, pigs, goats, and sheep, poultry, milk, eggs. This is in millions of dollars damage. The port blockades, and inability to export. The losses were done to the ports in wheat export, corn export, barley export, and sunflower export in millions of dollars. This is the inputs becoming more expensive, and as a result, the losses. So expensive inputs are because of the war and inability to supply them. So the demand is higher than the supply. So the losses in the fertilizers is in $1 million, and in fuel in $1 million. So if there were no war, there would be no price rise in these inputs. Of course, we are talking a lot about the damages to the infrastructural objects and to the towns and civil objects and military objects, but hardly anyone has been talking about the destruction of the actual soil. And this is very critical because now in this era, when we are considering organic cropping, when we are trying to shift to no tillage, not to disturb the soil, to take care of the organic matter and of the soil layers, and of course compaction. These things that you can see in our fields from the shellings, from the bombs explosion, these damages, they will be very dramatical for the future cropping in these fields. First of all, the landscape. You can imagine, and here you can see the pothole from the explosive of the bombs. If you take a 500 kilograms bomb mine thrown from the airplane and exploded in the field, it will result in the pothole that requires hundreds of trucks of soil to level it up. And the compaction and the chemical pollution, of course, there is no health life there. It will take dozens, if not hundreds of years to fix these fields from the war. And you can see how many of those potholes are in the fields that were both battlefields and agricultural fields in this war. Demining. This is the process that is going on these days very rapidly in the fields. It is expensive, but there is no way that we could not do it. So let me show you the video. It is showing very well how the process happens. The soldiers are involved in search for mines. So you can imagine, with the acreage of land that must be demined, equaling almost half of Ukraine and little over the total acreage of New Zealand, how long it will take to demine the fields. If the fields are not demined, we will continue to have the cases of agricultural machinery being exploding in the fields and people dying while doing the peaceful agricultural production job. Another act of violence to agriculture from the Russian troops have been developing in the southern regions, which were first to come into harvesting of winter crops. And that is, they have started to use the torch, the fire missiles, which just light down the harvest, the crop that is about to be harvested, and dozens of hectares are being burned down in Mykolaiv Oblast, in Kherson Oblast. So they are simply destroying the potential harvest, and they make it if they cannot take it over, then they destroy it so that Ukrainians will not be able to use it. The ports. There are a lot of talks about the mining of the ports. Who actually has mined the ports and who controls them? So for you to understand, there are majority of the ports controlled by Russian troops, and the ports of Odessa, and Charkiv, as well as the entrance of the Dnieper River into the Black Sea, have been mined by Russian troops. However, Ukrainian forces, they have mined the area very close to the Odessa shoreline in order to secure from the paratroops coming off the ships and attacking the region and killing the people. Therefore, over here in the, so to say, neutral, what's supposed to be neutral waters, Russian have landed the mines, but closer to Ukrainian, so in Ukrainian waters, Ukrainians have mined, but only in the area as of the information that is available right now. It might change, of course, and this is a secret from the military standpoint, but what Ukrainians mined was supposed to be security. What Russia mined is supposed to be disabling the export of grains. And you have heard their official statements that they do not control or they do not limit or influence the export possibility of Ukraine. This is what Lavrov recently said. Just June 22nd, there was another major attack towards the infrastructural objects of export of agricultural commodities. And those were the tanks of oil in the port of Mykolaiv. I would like to remind you that Mykolaiv port is in the Dnieper River, but it can accept huge ships like Panamax. So it is a very important agricultural port. And this is the second time they have shelled it. The first time they have burned the sunflower meal storage, which burned down totally. Now they have hit the tanks with the actual oil for export. And for you to understand, Ukraine produces 50% of sunflower oil from the total world production. This is the company, the corporation. It is international corporation that owns that facility, and these are some data about that facility that got stricken on the 22nd of June. They have stopped any work in the facility when the war started, so no people got hurt, but their oil, the produce, and the infrastructure was destroyed. This is another slide with the statistics. You can see how huge that location is. And mind that all of those tanks are full of the oil right now because they are not able to export. Another slide for the storage facilities that are being shelled. So the actual reason, it cannot be, if we just track the numbers of cases when they shelled and when they hit the storage facilities, it cannot be considered as the mistake, because otherwise they would be hitting the fields or neighboring objects. However, the amounts of times that they have hit the facilities with the crops, with the agricultural commodities, is such that it proves the fact that they are actually targeting it. And the reason why they are targeting it, especially after the political negotiations have been made to open the corridor, and Turkey decided to support this ability of Ukraine to export and to be an advocate of this possibility. Right after that, they have shelled the Mykolaiv terminal. Rubizhne, this is another, in the same day, another storage facility that was destroyed. And let me show you the video from this facility. Just a second. I'm sorry, just 1 second. This is how it looks right now. And it happened the same day when they hit Mykolaiv. It cannot be accidental or mishit, so to say. Okay, it was said at the beginning of last month, it was said that Russia has stolen about 600,000 tons of Ukrainian agricultural commodities from various enterprises in the south. And there have been a lot of journalist investigations showing that the actual commodities are spread throughout the ports of Syria and even Turkey. As Russians say, they're friendly countries. They are doing the trading with Ukrainian commodities with friendly countries. So how do they take those commodities? Because it is not the washing machine or a microwave oven that they can take in the tank as it used to be in the northern part of Ukraine. Right now, they require huge transportation capacities in order to take out the grains. So they use the railroads, which connects from Melitopol, goes to Jankoy and to Crimea. So they have ports in Crimea and in Kerch. So Sevastopol and Kerch port, and railroad can bring grains from the occupied areas in the south to those ports. Of course, they have trucks and possibility to bring, although it is more expensive, but still the trucks are standing in line, and you can see in the next slide, I will show you the line of trucks trying to enter Crimea. But they still lack the capacity because there is so much grain that they can steal. Therefore, they are trying to reopen the Berdyansk port, and they have already tried to use it for the ships to be loaded with grain. This is the publication by BBC. Yes, I just read this article in BBC. So there was one of the farmers who said that his trucks with grain were stolen, and he was able, by Russian forces, there were even videos of their tanks coming into his facility. And he said that the trucks had the GPS tracking, and as he was able to track them to the port of Kerch and then to continue. So Kerch, there is this bridge here, but there is also a port here. And as you can see, it went to the north from this area, the grain. This is the evidence, that's the road coming to the peninsula. And it has been since 2014 when the Crimea was annexed, kind of like the border line between occupied territories and between Ukraine. So it is it has the kind of a customs there, and this is the line of trucks totaling 350 at this Chonhar crossing coming to Crimea to bring the agricultural commodities. Again, you can see the trucks coming to the railroad from there in Jankoy. It can be more cheaper transported to the ports or to the actual continental part of Russia through this bridge in Crimea. I'm talking here. This is the bridge. So you can see how developed is the railroad system, and they are trying to set it up for utilizing of the grain transportation. They have used the port of Mariupol for the metals, lootering and transportation and selling. Now there is nothing left in the city that is considered to be valuable. Therefore, all the attention is made towards the setting up the routes to transport the grains. So about the ships, how the actual barges and ships transport the grain. There were 9 ships that used the new, so to say, program of selling. They turned off the transponders or the trackers, the GPS trackers, when they were loading by Ukrainian grain in the territory that is considered to be annexed and that is under sanctions, Crimea. Then, being in the port, which is official, they turned on the trackers and went to Turkey and Syria. So Turkey, although they know they must understand where the grain is coming from, they buy it and they do not return it back. And there have been cases already. That's not the only case, but this is the one that has been proven by the journalists from BBC that the port, the Turkish port, accepted Ukrainian grain. So how can we identify what are the ways to prove that legally it was stolen? United Kingdom, their scientists are considered to be very sophisticated in the ability to track the produce by the DNA. They have agreed to develop a program of testing the grain in order to be able to track the stolen grain from Ukraine. Let's see how it works, but this is one of the legal ways to punish those who are supporting the war and disregarding the law. Another interesting fact, sadly interesting fact, is that if you remember last times I've mentioned that Kherson Oblast, which is the southern oblast connecting to Crimea, it is Ukrainian California in the from the point of view of production of horticulture. We have a lot of open air vegetables and fruit coming from that region. The cherry that you can see on the left is produced in Melitopol. Melitopol is considered to be Ukrainian capital for cherries, sweet cherries. Both of these products were found in Belarus. Let's go back and see how it can, I'm sorry, I was trying to find a map. Oh, here. So here's Belarus, here's Kherson, here's Melitopol. So all that produce couldn't have gone through Ukraine for sure. So it must have been moved around like this, and it was found in Belarus. I wonder if it tastes good after that long way. Another fact that is maybe not that much considered to be agricultural production, but still we had the fields, the agricultural fields used for the solar production, energy produced from solar. And this is considered to be the biggest in Ukraine, if not one of three biggest in Europe. It equals to 100 soccer fields. And as a result, it has been all put apart and looted by Russians. So 96 hectares of the solar power station have been demounted and taken somewhere else from Ukraine. Now we are shifting to the next topic, the export of grains. We've been touching upon this topic already, but still there is a lot to discuss. So we have exported 48 millions of tons of grain and legumes as of June 27. Since the beginning of the month, of June month, it was only 1.1 million tons, which is about 5 times less than it used to be per month before the war. Last year, in the same time, the export was already dropping because of lower storage availability. Commodities availability in the storages. So we are only 44% from the same period last time. The most hectic period of exportation are the spring months usually. And during these months, we were able to export up to 6 million metric tons of grain on a monthly basis. This is starting from the beginning of the marketing year, the grain export. Breakdown in the crops. So we have exported corn, almost 1 million tons of corn in June, about 100,000 of wheat, 24,000 tons of barley, and rye was not shipped at all. Here is the breakdown for our ports. We've talked a lot about the ports, and there were a lot of news about each separate port, but let me bring some understanding for you how the ports work in Ukraine. So we have, this is the year 2021, before the war. These are all the Ukrainian ports, and I will show each of them for you on the map for you to understand why they are so important in agricultural production. And these red lines are the capacities of the cargo that the port can ship. So the biggest one was the southern port. Southern port, it is Ilyichovsk. It used to be called Ilyichovsk. It is located over here. This is it, below Odessa. Now it is called Southern Port. Then comes Mykolaiv Port. Remember, the second biggest port. It is located on the Dnieper River. You see here written Nikolaev. It is Russian transliteration, but I'm sorry. Let me correct. Yuzhny, yeah, you see, Russian and Ukrainian language. Yuzhny Port. It is the same as Southern Port, the biggest one. It's over Odessa. Then comes Nikolaev, which is the same as Mykolaiv Port, located in the Dnieper River. Then comes Chernomorsk Port. That is the one that is named Chernomorsk right now, but used to be named Ilyichovsk. Ilyich, that's after Lenin. Then comes Mariupol Port, 6.8 million metric tons capacity. It is located here. Port Olvia, I won't be able to show where it is, but then comes Berdyansk Port. This is it. Kherson Port is also located on the Dnieper River. Izmail Port is located on the Danube River. It is, as you can see, currently working because it is controlled by Ukrainian forces, by Ukraine, and it's on the river. So the ships from here do not come into the sea, although taking into consideration that Zmyiny Island, the Snake Island located somewhere here, is now not controlled by Russia. There might be a possibility of them coming into the Black Sea, but there is a high risk of those ships to be destroyed by Russian troops. Reni Port, again located on Danube River, and Ust-Dunaysk is also on the Danube River. So you can see 3 ports on the Danube River are located that can transport, and they go all the way to the Baltic Sea, to the north of Europe. However, the commodities need to be brought here, and that is the problem. Because over here, there is this bridge that was destroyed, the railroad bridge, and now they have to bring around this bay by trucks. All the commodities need to be brought around by trucks. Thank you for the comment. No, the Danube are also too risky for Russia to attack there. Okay, I understand. I agree with you, but our officials are considering transportation through the Danube River, although the capacity is small, but there have been a lot of talks, and we will be able to ask our expert in a couple of minutes. Ways to export. Of course, by train, we are the western border. This is the most important and most the biggest in capacity way to export. And of course, this Danube River ports that I've mentioned and we've just discussed, and by trucks. For you to understand, by trucks, it is huge amount of time standing in lines in the borders, and therefore the quality of the produce, Baltic Sea ports or the Black Sea. For grain going to Reni, does it then go to barge to the Baltic ports or Black Sea ports? We have been hearing from our officials that grain coming to Reni port is going to the Baltic ports. But again, we will ask our expert that is already here with us in just a couple of minutes. Okay, let's proceed. Валерій, ви там? Доброго дня, Валерій. Okay, still have some time. Okay, the ports are alternative that are not located in the Ukrainian territory. Constanța, Gdansk, and Klaipeda. Those are the ports that can export. However, what problems we have here? Constanța is supplying the services, is providing the services, first of all, to those farmers coming from Europe. And they have already stated that unless they have additional infrastructural investments, they will stop accepting Ukrainian grain. And once the harvest of winter crops starts in Europe, they will work only with European crops. Gdansk and Klaipeda requires a lot of transportation through the territories of EU, and here we have the narrower railroads. Poland announced that there is another port that can be transporting our commodities. It is named Kołobrzeg. However, it is very small. You see, only 300,000 of tons of cargo per year. That is literally nothing for us. So the routes that we are already using, Poland and Romania, and we've seen one ship coming from Romania, from Constanța, at least one ship. It was about 2 months ago, and Poland loaded a ship that came about a month ago, maybe 3 weeks, to Spain. Of course, we are negotiating the ability to transport to Lithuania, and Germany and Italy, they claim that they will support and develop the routes for us, but so far those are not working yet. These opportunities to export will work only as the railway and trucks coming to these countries and then being loaded in their ports. However, again, we have the same problem. First, with railway, narrower rails. Second, with trucks, long lines. Even long queues for the trains are a problem because at some time, in some cases, 90 days. This is how long the trains were claimed to stay. I'm not sure if that is hypothetical. However, within these lines, and now the weather is wet and hot, the grain is losing its quality. And you see there was a case when corn was discounted in price $30 less from metric ton due to this loss of quality. The blocked seaports, they result in huge losses for Ukrainian economy, not only for the farmers, but for the economy itself. Every day equals $170 million. And of course, we have the egg products that are blocked, equaling at least 90 million tons. And the value of it is over $1 billion, depending on the prices and on the commodities. So what we are talking about, what our officials are negotiating with Germans is to, first of all, to acquire more of the cars that are suitable for grain transportation on the railway and that are able to accommodate both track sizes. So we need the carriages with different track sizes, and we need the actual hoppers, the cars, and of course the improving or making the crossing of the border for these commodities faster than it used to be before. Meanwhile, what we as the country, as agricultural country, need are the storage facilities, because the new crop is coming and it is already being harvested. A lot of storage facilities, and we totaled 57 million metric tons of capacity of storage facilities throughout the country. A lot of it was destroyed. It is difficult to say right now which number is destroyed. However, we need more than we even had before the war with this situation. One of the solutions are these tunnels, plastic tunnels in the fields. But again, and there are a lot of problems, including even legal problems of the usage of the land. Second ways are the big bag storages, and of course, Mr. Biden has announced support in building temporary silos in Rivne Oblast, which is not bordering to Poland, but maybe it is from the transportation standpoint of view more interesting than Volyn Oblast, which is the border to Poland. Prices for the commodities inside Ukraine. We are with the war, with all the chains broken, and I would like to stress here that Ukraine does not require food supply from food aid coming from Europe. I've heard a lot of cases that trucks of food were coming to Ukraine. We need to fix our chains of supply instead. We have enough food in Ukraine. Farmers are not able to sell it, but once the food comes to the people's shelves, its value is much higher. For you to understand, we have this borscht set, and by the way, it was just yesterday that UNESCO identified borscht as the cultural treasure, non-material treasure, and it will be under protection. So Ukrainian, it is borscht is the traditional Ukrainian red beet, table beet soup, which consists of many vegetables. And we have this notion as the borscht set, which is economically equal to the Big Mac index. So this notion is showing how affordable the food is to the people. And borscht set, it is the most important food for Ukrainian people. So it's considered to be a standard of availability of the products. And we can see how much more expensive are the products to cook borscht. So 50% higher. What is in that borscht set? Table beet, potato, carrot, onions, of course, meat, tomatoes, and that's it. Yeah, and that's it. All the rest is the bread basket. So other important products like bread, milk, meat, and so on. So it has already. I already mentioned that the United States is and has been paying a lot of attention to Ukrainian export capacity. And here we need to understand that from the political standpoint of view, our inability to export influences the whole world economically. Therefore, while Ukraine is not able to export, the prices for the commodities are high, which results in more profits for the farmers worldwide and less availability of the food to the poor countries. Once we open our export, the prices will go down, the food will be more available, but the profit for the farmers worldwide will be less. So politically, it is very important to understand the consequences of any decisions. And again, it is only Ukrainian issue that we need to be working on to open the export. Ukrainian and of course the countries that depend upon this supply, because every action here affects the economical situation worldwide. So about the export, I've mentioned that. It's just the slide about it, that once the agreement between Turkey and Russia was made that Ukraine will be able to export so the corridor will be reopening for exportation of the commodities. There were a set of attacks towards the grain storages in Ukraine. You can make your conclusions yourself, but it has already been in the history. This kind of the war policy that they are using, they have used it towards Ukrainians years ago, and this is the fact. It's not just somebody's opinion. In 1932-33, there was a artificial famine, a starvation created by Russian forces, Russian militaries in Ukrainian villages, targeting the people. So it is already been admitted as genocide attempt of Ukrainians by many countries. And now what they're doing reminds very much of that previous actions. So some conclusions that a lot of journalists and some officials are making in the media. So Russia is using food as the weapon of war, a thing to blackmail. They didn't succeed to take over the land. Therefore, they are trying to force the world limit the aid to Ukraine, blackmailing with the food. And of course, weakening the agricultural production capacities, the industry, because this is the industry that brings 40% of the export money, of the money coming from the export. And of course, the ability to feed 400 million, that's the least. The max would be 600 million people a year around the globe. This is Ukrainian stronger side, and it can also again be used as the reason to blackmail. The blockade of the ports and inability to export, as I already mentioned, have resulted in shortage of food. For you to understand, 10% of the wheat production worldwide is done by Ukraine. And we will speak about technologies of production of wheat right after we finish this session here. Now I'm approaching to the purpose of our work these days. Short introduction to agricultural producers in Ukraine. There are three types of producers. First are the huge corporations. They are successful. They are producing about, they're working, farming about 20% of land. They hire people, they produce commodities, they are profitable. About 50% of the farmland is farmed by the individual farmers, who were the ones who purchased their devastated collective farms in the year 2000, and they have made them profitable. But also we have huge amount of people who are small family farms that have suffered from the war probably the most, and they have the least ability to bring back to normal life, to return to normal life and rebuild. Their production is huge. They make up about 70% of total production of horticulture crops, 60%, as I've already mentioned, of dairy produce, small spring grains, 40%, potato, 90%. On our website, wrru.org, you can see a better breakdown on the amounts that these family farms produce in Ukraine. So we have come up with the project about 3 months ago named Road to Rebuild Rural Ukraine, aiming to, first of all, spread the information about the damages to the rural areas in Ukraine, and secondly, raise the money to help some of the families rebuild their houses and their production capacities. I've been traveling with my family throughout the United States for 2 months already, doing the presentation and delivering the information through the media, because hardly any media speaks about the rural areas damages. Mainly it is about war and about the devastation of the cities. But these people, they are left under the open sky, and soon winter is coming. They need to live somewhere. So we have developed the program that is targeting the actual smallest agricultural producers in the areas that suffered Russian aggression, that were destroyed or severely damaged, and that have no possibility to rebuild themselves. Therefore, they require our help. We are targeting 4 things within these households. First is the actual houses. Second is the production capacities, like greenhouses or barns or so on. Third are the equipment, agricultural equipment. And fourth is the farm animals. In order to make this program most transparent, and this is very important here, we are inviting reputable people to not only testify for our sake, but to prove that we are legal, but also to overlook the process of money distributing. Once we have the aid recipient that we consider to be valid to receive the aid from us, we write the email to the Board of Ambassadors, and if they disagree, they can veto our decision. So the company that invests, that donates, they can assign their ambassador and be not only able to oversee the money spendings, but to influence the decisions how the money is spent. This is very important, and I would like you to pay attention to this. Another important thing, that we do not give off cash. This is the aid provided in the form of rebuilding, reconstructing of the important vital premises for these people, and the repurchasing of the agricultural machinery. And we do not upgrade. If these people had a 120 horsepower tractor, we will repurchase them the same used 120 horsepower tractor, because this is what they have earned for, this is what they know how to utilize, and this is what they have been ruthlessly taken away from. Right now, we have chosen 3 potential aid recipients, and we are collecting the donations toward these 3 families. We are about to approach the Board of Ambassadors with the plan how to work with each of those 3 farms, but that's not maybe the right word. Farm facilities or family farms. First is the Alexander Krivosheya farm, 500 hectare, probably the biggest who we might consider working with, but he lost literally everything: the premises, the inputs, the commodities, and the equipment. However, he continues to farm, and he's hoping for the best. We are looking for the way to help him repurchase the equipment and rebuild the storages. The second is the family of Alla Kokosha. 7 people lived in the house, which was destroyed almost totally. Just 2 walls remained standing on March 28th. And we are targeting to collect donations to help rebuild their house, because with no roof over her head, she is not able to think of production. And you can see there are greenhouses at the back of their garden, and so they do some small vegetables production. Of course, the third one is that we have stated is the C aid recipient, so ABC. Irina Shevchenko, she had this barn with the, as we call it, kitchen, summer kitchen, where she cooked some food and where they had the equipment storage, and of course the animals. So 8 cows were in the field. However, the pigs and the chicken were inside the barn, which was destroyed by the missile, and all the animals, all the facility was destroyed. They need a facility to, at least for the animals, to bring them before the winter into warmer conditions, and of course repurchase the animals. So these are some facts about this farm. They were the last to join, and last time when we had the bi-weekly, we were doing the live broadcasting from their facility. And this is the approximate budget of reconstruction for them, of their barn. So how to help? We have partnered with a reputable NGO in the United States, and we are asking every farmer who cares for his or her peers in Ukraine, the smallest egg producers, to donate at $200. And with that donation, they will get access to our platform on the newest technologies of production of the commodities. This is the new idea that we've come up in order to give something back to those who donate. So all the money comes to the World to Rebuild Rural Ukraine project. However, we give off the information that is stored in our on our website. Let me show the address of this website. So it is agrotravelite.com.ua, and we have a lot of valuable courses here. We are just preparing it to look more user-friendly. You see the prices, separate prices. However, for $200, we give off all the courses. If someone donates $200 towards World to Rebuild Rural Ukraine, we open live access to these materials to those agricultural producers, and we are sure that they will benefit much more than $200 that they donate. Please help us spread this information, and we will be returning back to you with more details on this project. Another way to support Ukrainian egg producers is to actually donate 1 penny from the future, per bushel from the future yield, which is coming this July month or in the fall. This is a way to provide help, even though if you right now cannot help, but from the future crop, there might be more possibilities. So 1 penny per bushel, it is not that much, but it might be vital for those people waiting, expecting some help from us. And of course, I will proceed traveling in the United States for another month, but we will be doing this project for years. So whenever there is a possibility for us to present to the media or to the decision makers of agricultural companies or foundations, please help us get in contact with the right people to present to them. We have developed the program that is very transparent, that is very targeted and very precise. And it is very important. Unfortunately, so far, we are the only ones in this area. So more details, here is my phone number. Here is the information in my email and the website address. Please invite more people to support and to talk to us. We have a lot of things to give off in return. Now we are approaching to our guest, Валерій Ткачов. Valery, are you there? Валерій, доброго дня, ви тут?
Да, добрый день, я на связи. Всем здравствуйте.
Okay, hello everyone, I'm here. Hello everyone. So Vitaly is the vice director of the commerce of the Ukrainian railroads. And Vitaly is responsible for any transportation of the commodities via railroads. Віталій якраз презентував вас згідно вашої посади і ваших обов'язків. Дякую, що знайшли час. Будь ласка, розкажіть нам пофактно, по-перше, наскільки зараз складна ситуація з цим експортом і наскільки альтернатива залізницею боєздатна, робочоздатна, і що ми втратили з початком війни. So I asked Vitaly to tell us what is the current situation with the export of commodities via railroads and what is the changes, what are the losses that we have had from the standpoint of the transportation system as the war started, because he's been doing it before the war and he continues to run this part of their services.
Хочу начать с того, что железнодорожный транспорт в Украине занимает ключевую роль в транспортной системе страны.
First of all, I would like to stress that railroads is the key industry in the transportation system of Ukraine.
65% всех грузов в стране перевозится железной дорогой.
65% of all the cargoes are shipped and transported by the railroad.
До войсковой агрессии ежегодно мы перевозили примерно 315-320 миллионов тонн грузов.
Before the war started, we were transporting about 315, 320 million tons of the cargo value. Это на месяц?
Это в год.
In a year, every year.
Ежемесячно объемы перевозки составляли примерно 27-29 миллионов тонн. Ежемесячно.
Every monthly it was 27-29 million metric tons.
С началом военной агрессии объем перевозки у нас упал до 9,5 миллионов тонн.
With the war, as the war started, per month we are transporting about 9 million tons, so 3 times less.
Основная причина такого падения – это то, что более 60% предприятий прекратили свою работу либо сократили выпуск продукции.
The main reason for this reduction is because about over 60% of the production facilities in Ukraine industries, they have either closed, shut down, or limited their production radically, and therefore the produce is less.
Вторая причина такого резкого падения – это то, что морские порты были заблокированы, на сегодня заблокированы. В направлении портов до войны мы вывозили примерно 120 миллионов тонн грузов. Сейчас это мы не делаем.
Because of the blockade of the ports, we stopped shipping towards the ports, and that equaled about 120 million metric tons of the produce coming throughout from different locations in Ukraine to the ports. And now we are not doing that because the ports are blocked.
На сегодня после блокировки портов у нас только остается возможность экспортировать через западные погранпереходы с западными странами.
Right now, the only option for us is left to cross the borders, the western borders, with western neighboring countries, and that way export the facilities, the commodities to Europe.
Всего мы имеем по железной дороге 13 таких пограничных переходов с 5 странами.
We have about 13 of this type of crossings with 5 countries in the West.
Через эти погранпереходы ежемесячно на сегодня на экспорт мы отправляем 3,9 миллиона тонн различных грузов в месяц.
Through these 13 crossings, we export about 3.9 millions of metric tons of various cargoes coming to the Western countries.
Из этого количества доля зерновых или количество зерновых составляет примерно 800 тысяч тонн в месяц.
The agricultural commodities, the grain is equaling about 0.8 million metric tons per month through the railroad crossings to the Western countries.
Это очень существенное падение экспорта и перевозки грузов, так как, например, до войны в направлении портов мы вывозили 3,5-4 миллиона тонн зерна, теперь вывозим только 800 тысяч в направлении западных погранпереходов.
It is very huge decrease because, for you to understand, before the war we were exporting about 3.5 million metric tons of agricultural commodities towards the ports. Right now, we are only exporting 0.8 million metric tons through the crossings, the border.
Основная причина, почему мы не можем больше передавать, экспортировать через западные погранпереходы, это разный размер колеи. В Украине 1520 миллиметров, в Европе 1435. Это разные ЖД-системы.
The main obstacle for us to be able to export more via these railroad crossings is the difference in the size of rails. We have wider railroads than Europe has, approximately 9 centimeters. На 10 сантиметрів виходить, да?
Да.
Mhm.
Поэтому приходится на границе перегружать из вагона украинского в вагон европейский.
Therefore, we need to reload from Ukrainian car into the European standard car, grain
Поэтому,
on the crossing. Mhm.
поэтому первый ограничивающий фактор – это количество терминалов на границе, которые могут перегружать груз.
So the first limiting factor is the amount of the terminals able to reload the grain between the cars.
Но самый большой ограничитель увеличения перевозки – то, что с той стороны границы перевозчики Европы оказались не готовы к такому дополнительному объему груза.
Another problem is that on the other side of the border, the transporting companies of Europe were not prepared and were not expecting these high volumes of the produce coming from Ukraine.
Западные перевозчики не имеют достаточного количества вагонов, локомотивов, и у них ограниченная возможность перевозки наших грузов.
So they have limited amount of cars and they have limited ability to transport our cargo.
Из-за дефицита локомотивов, вагонов, они берут намного меньший объем груза, чем мы готовы поставить к границе.
Therefore, we can bring much more of the agricultural commodities towards the border than they are able and willing to pick up at the border because of the, first of all, because of the lack of the cars and the trains.
Помимо этого, у нас есть проблемы на границе, связанные с бюрократическими задержками. Имеется в виду пограничные, таможенные и фитосанитарные контроли, которые делаются с этой стороны границы и с другой стороны границы.
In addition to that, we have a lot of paperwork, bureaucratical steps that we need to pass on both sides of the border, Ukrainian border and EU border.
В этом вопросе мы с западными партнерами сейчас ведем переговоры по упрощению и уменьшению этих видов контролей.
This is something that we are trying to negotiate with our Western partners right now, how to make this control and this paperwork lesser and quicker.
Но даже в целом, если посмотреть на возможный экспорт аграрной продукции, то, к сожалению, он у нас ограничен примерно 2-3 миллионами тонн в месяц.
So, but if everything is fixed and fine-tuned, we are still going to be limited with 2, maybe 3, that's maximum, million metric tons capacity to export the agricultural commodities to Europe. So the maximum that we can reach is 3 million metric tons per month.
При этом этот объем будет экспортирован 3 видами транспорта. Примерно 1 миллион тонн перевезет железная дорога, примерно 500-700 тысяч в месяц перевезет 4 порта в устье Дуная, и примерно 400 тысяч – это автотранспорт.
So, but that is, if we break down this amount, 2 to 3 million metric tons, 1 million will be railroad capacity of exportation. About 700,000 will be the 4 ports in the Dunay, Danube River, and the remaining will be the truck transportation, and it will then show, depending on how big the truck transportation is, it will be or 400,000 or more.
Но эти 2-3 миллиона – это очень маленький объем, потому что до войны мы экспортировали 5-7 миллионов ежемесячно.
But you can see how much less it will be compared to what we have been doing before the war, 5 to even sometimes 7 million metric tons total exportation capacity before the war.
И это настоящая трагедия для украинских аграриев.
This is a huge tragedy for Ukrainian agricultural producers.
С такими темпами экспорта мы сможем за год вывести примерно 25-30 миллионов тонн.
With these capacities, we will be able to export per year about 25-30 million metric tons of agricultural commodities only.
Таким образом, примерно 30 миллионов тонн мы не сможем физически вывести без разблокировки портов Черного моря.
Therefore, with this limitation, we will not be able to export another at least 30 million metric tons of the commodities that must be exported to the world markets of agricultural commodities.
Поэтому первая задача, которую хотелось бы, или помощь получить от западных партнеров, это заставить или организовать конвои по вывозу зерна из Украины через Черное море. В противном случае имеющиеся виды транспорта не смогут вывести даже половины урожая украинского зерна.
Therefore, the aid we are looking for from the Western allies is the convoys or the accompanying of reopening the corridors of shipments through the Black Sea and assuring the safety of those ships, because otherwise we will not be able to export even half of all the commodities. Так, у нас тут запитання. Just recently, Ukrainian Railways raised the transportation tariff by 70%. However, there is still a discounted tariff for metallurgical products in place. Нещодавно підняли тариф на 70% Укрзалізниця на транспортування, але залишається меншим тариф для металургійних продуктів. This is the discriminative towards agricultural companies. Why is that? Ага, каже, чи це не дискримінує, запитання звучить, чи це не дискримінує саме аграрних виробників, і чому так? Чому металургія користується більшим, так би мовити, привілеєм?
В тарифообразовании, при образовании тарифов на перевозку грузов еще с прошлого века есть такой подход, который говорит, что груз должен платить ту сумму, которую он может платить. Поэтому высокомаржинальные, дорогие грузы должны платить больший тариф за перевозку, чем дешевые низкомаржинальные грузы. И вот этот принцип был заложен в украинскую тарифную систему. Дорогие маржинальные грузы платят большую стоимость перевозки, чем грузы низкостоимостные и так далее. Поэтому руда платит меньше, чем платит зерно. При этом Укрзалезница сейчас хочет уменьшить этот разрыв. И мы делаем все, чтобы уменьшить этот разрыв.
So the difference in the prices for transportation is because of the margin of profit in the commodities, and it is tied up in the percentage or rate to this margin. So in the ore, the metal ore, the margin is lesser, and that was the rule coming from the previous century. And right now, Ukrainian railroads are working through the scenarios how to decrease this difference in the prices formation and make it less visible. Так, але ж зерно коштує менше, ніж руда. А кошти на транспортування обох продуктів, якщо виходячи від ваги, то вони, по ідеї, такі ж самі.
Здесь на самом деле зерно стоит на ФОБе примерно $350, руда стоит меньше, если приравнивать к базису. Поэтому стоимость руды меньше, чем зерна, поэтому платит больше. Но, подчеркиваю, Укрзалезница пытается уменьшить этот разрыв в стоимости перевозки грузов. И следующим этапом мы планируем сблизить стоимость транспортировки всех грузов.
Mhm. So the basic price of the corn is about $300 per ton, whereas the ore basic price, basis price is lower. But I would like to underline that we are working on the programs how to reduce this difference in prices and to make it more even for all the commodities.
Я еще хочу заострить внимание на одном вопросе, что на сегодня экспортная логистика зерна с элеватора Украины до порта Констанции в среднем составляет $180 США. В целом,
На тонну?
На тонну.
So the value of transportation of 1 metric ton of the grains from Ukrainian producing areas towards the Constance port is about $185 per metric ton. This is the value of the transportation costs.
При этом затраты на ЖД-тариф перевозку зерна по территории Украины это примерно $25–30. Все остальные затраты это перевалка на границе, это перевозка по территории Румынии и перевалка в порту. То есть из $180 Укрзалезница зарабатывают только $25–30. Все остальные расходы, они находятся за границей, логистические расходы.
So, and in this price, only about $25–30 per metric ton. This is the tariff by Ukrainian railroads. All the other part of the price is the value that are charged by the terminals at the border and terminal in the port and transportation through the railroads abroad. Therefore, Ukrainian agricultural commodity transportation with railroads is much lower than even a half or even a third of what is the total.
При этом мы наблюдаем беспрецедентное повышение логистических затрат или цен за границей. Например, до войны перевалка в портах Констанции стоила примерно €6 на тонне, сейчас она поднялась до 25. И это спекулятивный рост со стороны стивидора в Румынии. Та же самая ситуация со стороны румынских перевозчиков и собственников терминалов на границе, которые в 3 раз подняли стоимость своих услуг.
Сколько раз? Еще раз? Сколько пропадал зв'язок?
3-7 раз.
So also there is a very huge rise of the prices. First of all, in the port of Constance, which was before the war $5 per metric ton for reloading. Right now it is 25, or maybe it was 6, but now it is 25. The same prices rise are being seen due by the transportation companies and by the reloading terminals at the border. So from up to 7 times higher have become the prices since the beginning of the war for these services. Тут якби коментар, що різниця в ціні швидше за все це лобіювання металургійних комплексів у власності олігархів, які відбувалися ще з 96-го року. Мали місце бути. So we have a comment here that those differences in price might have been the lobbies by metallurgical oligarchs starting from 1996.
При этом хочу сказать, что в 2021 году, прошлом, мы грузы первого тарифного класса, это руда, повысили на 30%, зерно второй класс на 15%, а третий класс вообще не повышали. Таким образом, этих на 30, 15, 0, то есть мы пытаемся выровнять. То есть мы грузы олигархов поднимаем постоянно в цене на большую величину, чем, например, зерно. То есть зерно в прошлом только 15%, а руда на 30, и еще потом плюс 9, почти на 40% мы подняли в прошлом году.
Also, please pay attention that in 2021 we have changed the prices, and the first class of the cargo, which are the ores of the oligarchs, as you've mentioned, the price for transportation has risen for 30%. The price for the grain, which is second class cargo, has been increased
15.
only by 15, and the third class cargo has
Zero.
not been risen at all. Immediately, the discrimination of agri products as compared to iron ore. There's no economical explanation behind the difference between tariffs. The cost of transportation to the railway is just the same. Ну, так би тут логіка коментатора в тому, що по факту, якщо так подивитися справедливо, то виходить дискримінація агровиробничих бізнесів, тому що з точки зору фізики, з точки зору транспортування, то економічних затрат для транспортування зерна більше не може бути, аніж руди. Воно виходить те саме, просто політика і, ну да, і лобіювання.
Я еще хочу добавить, что самая большая проблема, которая стоит сейчас перед аграриями, это то, что физически мы не можем больший объем проэкспортировать через границу. При этом, например, Укрзалезница готова в 2 раза больше зерна привезти к границе. Но неготовность наших партнеров с той стороны границы принимать этот больший объем создает вот этот, скажем, лимит в экспорте зерна.
Yes, and also I would like to stress that the major problem for the agricultural producers right now that is influencing the price too, that is inability of our partners in the EU behind the Western border to accept those amounts of grain that we would like them to accept. Therefore, we are just tied up with their inability, their lower capacity of transportation. Скажіть, будь ласка, а оцей міст, по-перше, в Черкасах, який був недавно за діло, чи він, наскільки він функціонує? І друге, це які шанси відбудувати цей міст, який веде до румунського порту Констанца? І правильно, чи правильно я розумію, той другий міст в Констанца через цю затоку, він же ж, там не транспортувалася ніяка інша продукція, окрім сільськогосподарської. Тобто там не було привозки ніякого озброєння чи щось з Румунії, бо воно не звідти йде. I just asked a question about those two bridges that were recently destroyed. One in the southern part of Odessa Oblast, leading to the Constanța port. There was a bridge, a railroad bridge over the bay that was destroyed and is not functioning right now. And the second one is in Cherkasy that I mentioned in one of the slides. So how badly is the second one destroyed, and how long will it take to rebuild the first one?
Я хочу сказать, что за время войны агрессор системно разрушает нашу ЖД инфраструктуру. За это время уже разрушено, помимо этих двух мостов, суммарно около 50 железнодорожных мостов и примерно 6,3 километров колеи повреждено либо захвачено. 6,3 тысячи километров. Поэтому эти два моста – это капля в общем массе разрушений.
So for you to understand, Russian army, military, they have been targeting the Ukrainian railroad systems as the priority, and they have destroyed 6.3 thousands of kilometers of the railroads, and at least 50 bridges were destroyed over the these 3 months' time. So it is these 2 bridges, they are just one of the a small portion of the total wreckage that has been done by the war.
Но украинская железная дорога имеет очень хороший запас прочности из-за того, что у нас очень разветвленная сеть, примерно 23 тысячи километров, и мы разрушенные участки объезжаем другой дорогой. Если
We need to understand that, thanks God, we have a very good infrastructure of railroads, over 23,000 kilometers. And in case if some connection is broken, we can use the bypasses and alternative routes.
Если говорить о мосте, который вы озвучили, это Белгород-Днестровский возле Одессы мост, то он ведет только к порту Измаил. На сегодня он разрушен, и мы собираемся в течение 2 месяцев его восстановить. То есть этот мост только ведет к порту Измаил, он в Констанцию не идет. То есть мы потеряли ЖД-сообщение с портом Измаил.
So the Belgorod-Dnestrovsk bridge that I mentioned over the bay in the south part of Odessa Oblast, it was connecting to the Izmail port, not to the Constanza port. This is important. So we plan to rebuild it within, within 2 months, but it is connecting only to Izmail port, not to the Constanza. That's important.
При этом мы рассматриваем альтернативный путь, чтобы связать другой участок и в обход этого моста проехать на Измаил. У нас есть инвестиционный проект Березино-Бессарабяски. Березино-Бессарабяски, чтобы заезжать в порт Измаил по другому участку в обход этого моста.
But we are considering an alternative investing project, rebuilding
Березино-Бессарабяски.
2 towns, Berezino and Bessarabyaski, to be connected with the railroad, and it will provide an alternative access to Izmail port with the railroad. That's a second one.
Это позволит через территорию Республики Молдова попадать грузом на этот Измаильский порт.
That will allow to come through the Moldovan territory with these cargo ships towards the Izmail port. So we will need to cross the border twice. Двічі треба буде перетинати кордон, правильно? Yeah.
При этом хочу сказать, что железная дорога Украины продолжает функционировать. Мы постепенно наращиваем объемы перевозки грузов через западные погранпереходы. Например, в феврале, в марте месяце мы через границу перевезли всего лишь 400 тысяч тонн зерна. Через 2 месяца мы перевезли уже 800 тысяч тонн зерна на экспорт через 13 погранпереходов. Следующая наша цель – это 1 миллион тонн в течение месяца перевозить зерна через эти 13 погранпереходов.
However, Ukrainian railroads is functioning and it is improving in the total capacity of transportation of these products. For you to understand, in February, when the war started, we were able to transport with the railroad only 0.4 million metric tons. Right now, we are able to transport 0.8 already in June, and our aim is to transport to raise the capacity to 1 million metric tons. Добре, Валерій, я, в принципі, якщо у вас є хіба що ще додати, бо я відчуваю, я вас перебив, наче.
Я хочу еще один тезис озвучить, что даже если мы нарастим объемы перевозки через границу, надо понимать, что все польские порты в прошлом году перевалили всего лишь 8 миллионов тонн зерна. Порт Констанция перевалил 25 миллионов тонн зерна. Суммарно это 33. При этом только Украине для вывоза надо 60 миллионов тонн перевалки. Если рассматривать дальние порты Европы, Роттердам, Средиземного моря, там очень дорогая логистика, она убьет маржинальность и аграрий не сможет туда чисто экономически вывозить свое зерно. Поэтому единственный выход – это разблокировка наших портов.
I would like to stress the economical side of things here. So the Polish ports, all the Polish ports were able to export about 8 million metric tons of commodities, grain commodities last year. Constanța port was able to do the same with 25 million metric tons. Total, it equals about 33 million metric tons, which is half of the total amount of the commodities that must be exported from Ukraine on the annual basis. If we talk about the Rotterdam ports and other further European ports, they are too expensive to bring commodities there, and they will kill any profit, so that the Ukrainian farmer will not be able to earn anything if exporting there. Therefore, the only solution that is left is to reopen the Black Sea ports. Дякую, Валерій, за дуже детальний аналіз. Я бажаю, перш за все, вам безпеки, тому що я бачив цю програму, де Олександр Камишин їздив разом із нашим оглядачем туристичним. Забув, як його звуть, але дуже цікава була програма, і вона трошечки допомогла зрозуміти цей ризик, який лягає на ваші плечі. Звісно, від імені наших аграріїв хочу сказати, продовжуйте працювати над вирівнюванням ціни. Це справді важливо. Ось, і нехай українська індустрія, Україна переможе не тільки в військовому, а й в економічному сенсі. So I said thank you for the very detailed breakdown and for the continuing efforts to make the prices more fair for everyone. Please proceed. This is important for Ukrainian agricultural producers, and may Ukraine win this war not only in the military standpoint, but in the economical side of things too. Дякую ще раз. So now we will be proceeding to the next stage, which is first time that we are doing, and this is the topic that we are going to test, covering the topic of production of some. Okay, so there is exactly only option is to open Black Sea ports, and this is why it is necessary to have the West aid in security ports. Thank you, Stephen. This is very rightly said, but we need to remember that if we, and I was showing, if we open the mined territory around Odessa, in between the cargo ships, Russian ships will stick in and enter our territory. Therefore, security and availability of the Western military ships taking care of the security is very important. But how can it be done so that NATO does not get in contact with Russia? This is a very serious political thing that I have no answer to. But as far as I've understood from all the news coming in, this is the issue that stops the ports from opening. Meanwhile, Russia is targeting the storages with those commodities that must be exported. And that influences the food security worldwide. 10% of only wheat is produced in Ukraine from the total world production. But we have a lot of other products: sunflower oil, corn, barley, canola, and a lot of others. Okay, so now we are shifting to the second part of the last, but not the least part of our today's session is the presentation about wheat production. It will take about an hour of your time. If you need to be running somewhere else, of course, you will have the recording of it. Please spread the word about our events between your colleagues, between everyone, because as you can see, it is not only about charity, it is about the fair information coming to the world, and about sharing some of our best experience in production of the crops. And we've been learning these things for decades. These technologies have proven to be successful in Ukraine, and I'm sure the colleagues, the peers from worldwide will be able to benefit from these technologies. So now Denis Serhienko, he is the farmer and he is the partner of Travelite Agro, will present to you the presentation on wheat production, the way it is done in Ukraine. For you to understand, the presentation was prepared with our team, Travelite, and we were trying to target the points that are most interesting to everyone, and that can, as I said, be used to like borrow in your countries. So take some attention, prepare a glass of milk or coffee, and let's proceed. Denis, hello, please. You have the co-host. Can you share your presentation?
Hi, Roman. Can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
Okay, that's good. Now I will try to share my screen. Just a second, please.
Mm-hmm. Of course, we will be welcoming your feedback about this type of information, and in the future, we will be doing the same. We plan to be doing the same presentations about other crops. If you want us to change something and to fine tune the information, please write me back. You have my contact information, and we will try to comply with all your requirements and not demands, but preferences. Okay, Denis, please go ahead. We can see the first part, but we can see the column of the slides on the left.
Okay, so you're not able to see full screen?
No, not yet.
Unfortunately. Okay, let's try this way. Does it work now?
No, it hasn't changed yet. The same. Maybe you need to restart the screen sharing.
Yeah. Is it okay now?
No, yes, it is full screen now.
All right. So I'm glad to welcome everybody who joined this online event. That's a great chance to speak about wheat production in Ukraine, to talk about the challenges that we faced this year. As Roman mentioned, I'm also a farmer. Basically, I'm a farmer, the first hand, and presenter for this presentation on the second hand. So let's start, because we have plenty of slides and a ton of statistical data. I don't want to overload you, so please feel free to stop, to comment, to ask questions. You are welcome. Okay, so this is a map of key wheat producing regions in the world. As you can see, China is being number one, and unfortunately, Russia is being probably number 2 or number 3. Then definitely North America region, and of course, Europe. In terms of wheat yields, you can see that the leading role belongs to European states. First of all, United Kingdom, then probably Germany, France, then China, and also other regions. As you can see,
New Zealand, by the way, in New Zealand, there is a record breaker who seems to me in 2018 and 2019 have set the record of 18 or 17 metric tons per hectare of wheat production. And we plan to be visiting him on the tour this winter. Sorry for interruption, gents. Wanted to get in.
That's okay. Below the map, you can see the scale. It's in tons, but if we convert to bushels per acre, it should be from 0 to 160 bushel per acre, just for general understanding of yield differences. And as you can see, despite the fact that Russia is one of key wheat producing regions by acreage, but in terms of wheat yields, it definitely lags behind. Okay, so wheat production in 2022-23 marketing year. First of all, these are the estimates. We should understand that for sure. And what we can see from here that European countries are ranking #1 in terms of wheat production. And then India comes the second, then Russia, then North America continent, and Australia. Oh, basically, yeah. Ukraine is shown over there. You can see the map of Ukraine. It falls into category of between 13 and 29 million tons. Okay, so Ukraine is by the wheat acreage, it is ranking 17th on the world scale. But in terms of production, as you can see over that column, it ranks number seven in terms of yield production. Because of relatively high yield, which is 4.5 metric tons per hectare. That approximately converts to 69 bushels per acre. Of course, we're talking about the average, and in some key wheat producing regions, we have yields which are topping up to 120, 140 bushel per acre. There are some agricultural farms that can even produce up to 160. So this is just the state statistics. As you can see, the dynamics of wheat acreages changed a little bit over the past 5 years. It increased by approximately 10%. One of the reasons why it happened, because the drought areas in Ukraine are expanding. The climate change is happening here as well. We have less moisture, higher temperature, and wheat is one of not many options actually what to grow, especially in southern and eastern parts of Ukraine. Last year, it was one of the record-setting years for Ukraine in terms of wheat production. We harvested 33 million tons, but unfortunately, approximately 30 to 35% of total wheat which was harvested is still being blocked at Ukrainian ports. It is left on occupied territories, and a vast portion of it has been already stolen by Russians. Roman has described the overall situation very well, so I won't stop and spend a lot of time on that. Okay, so this is just a graphical depiction of wheat world production. Again, as you can see, European Union is #1. The market share is 18%, then China 18%. But in the case of China, it's really important to mention that domestic consumption in China is really high, and China doesn't play significant role at the world markets in terms of wheat exports. The same situation with India, despite India accounts for 14% market share, almost 100% is consumed domestically, and India imports some wheat from the world. The Ukrainian market share is 4%, but despite the low percentage, approximately 70% of the total wheat which is grown here is being exported worldwide. If we look at the map of Ukraine, we can see that winter wheat is grown everywhere. However, the southern and eastern part of Ukraine are key wheat growing regions. To some extent, the central part, but it's not significant, and northwestern part of Ukraine doesn't play a big role in terms of winter wheat acreages. And from this map, it becomes evident that the key wheat producing regions in Ukraine are now under attack of Russian invasion. Here we have, this is Lugansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhia, Odessa, Kherson, Odessa regions, and also, this is Odessa region. So here we have this one region accounts for almost 10% of the total acreage sown in Ukraine. As to spring wheat historically wasn't really important in Ukraine. Over the last couple of years, it was considered to be a rather niche crop, and most of it was grown in northern and some western regions. Why is that? Because these regions are more happy with precipitation, with moisture, while the southern part, eastern part, they have to rely on winter moisture coming from snow. And if they don't have enough moisture accumulated over the winter season, growing spring crops is always a risky operation. Okay, so on previous slides we were talking about the winter wheat acreages, but here we have a depiction of the grain produced by those regions. As I mentioned before, Odessa, Kherson, Zaporizhia, Donetsk, and Kharkiv are key wheat producing regions in Ukraine. And all of them are now heavily attacked, and most of them are already partially occupied by Russian troops. The cropping schedule depends on the region in Ukraine. In central western parts, normally the planting season for winter crop starts in the middle of September, and normally it can last until the mid of October. In some cases, some farmers are still be able to plant in November. However, it is too risky because the first killing frost normally happens on the turn of October and November. So that is why from November we usually have a dormancy state for winter wheat. Depending on the weather, in the middle of March, winter wheat becomes awakes and resumes tillering. As you understand that the most of tillering should be promoted in this period of time. That's why it's really important to finish planting winter wheat by the beginning of October, because we need a month, at least a month, to have 3 to 5 tillers fully developed before the wheat becomes dormant. There are some cases, even in central west and the northern west part of Ukraine, when the winter is very warm and there is plenty of moisture, and that even the wheat which was planted in the middle of November still was able to vegetate over the winter months and to produce tillers by the mid of March. But of course, it's not the rule, and we should follow a very tight schedule to get 3 to 5 tillers. Normally, in my region, flowering starts on the turn of May and June. Again, it all depends on the weather, on varieties which we plant, on many factors, but normally it's at the beginning of June. And in terms of harvesting, normally it starts at the middle of July, in the middle of July. If we talk about southern region, normally the schedule is shifted towards the winter, because if they start planting really early, then there is always the risk that the winter wheat becomes overdeveloped. It produces a lot of tillers, and there is a next stage of stem elongation happens, and you certainly understand that elongated stem always leads to high risks of overwintering. So normally they try to shift it a little bit towards the winter. Also, it's very common that that the wheat which is sown in October is still vegetating over the winter months. Okay, let's proceed further. As I already mentioned, because of the climate change, there is an obvious shift of the grain production from the south to the north. This is a map of grain and leguminous crops sown in 1990, and you can see that the majority of those crops were sown in central and southern part of Ukraine, while the northern part and the western part, they were considered 30 years ago as being quite risky regions, especially for winter crops, for winter wheat, winter barley, winter canola. But nowadays, the situation completely changed. Now we have the situation when actually the arid zone moved approximately 100 miles to the north. Now the central part of Ukraine, despite they have a brilliant fertile soil called Chernozem, they are not able to produce high yields anymore, just only because of the one factor, which is lack of moisture. So basically, that's what I already explained. How steppe zone, so-called steppe zone, is moving to the north, and there are some estimates that in 30 years, the steppe zone, arid zone, will shift another 100 miles to the north. And I can tell you that despite I am located in this part of the country, which is abundant for precipitation, And normally we have 25, 27 inches of rain over the year, including the snow, of course.
We see something we're doing right here.
Oh, absolutely. And like I said, we'll take these documents and when we're out with growers and customers.
Okay, so I may continue. However, the distribution of the moisture and rainfall is not even. It means that we can easily have 1 or even 1.5 months of no rain at all. Basically, that's what is happening now. The last rain happened 3 weeks ago, and now we have 32, 34 plus Celsius temperature. Everything is burning down. But next, what can happen? We will have a rainfall, which can potentially do even more harm in terms of washing out everything from the fields. So the situation is becoming worse the year, every next year. As you certainly understand, the yield potential of winter wheat is determined not just by soil fertility and not by variety, but in the first hand, it's all about the moisture. You can see that Ukraine falls in the category of yellow color, which is 50 to 60% of yield potential, as compared to Western European countries, where they have up to, let's say, 100%. This is the reason why Germany, France, Netherlands, and especially UK, they normally have the highest possible yields, even they have the soil which is not as fertile as Ukrainian Chernozem. The only explanation to that is moisture and not because of technologies. Ukrainian farmers learn very quickly, and we adopt every possible state-of-art technology and try to implement it our fields. But the moisture, rainfall, the most limiting factors. So basically, we were able just to discover 50 to 70% of wheat yield potential. Now we have to go through some numbers, but I will try to explain very important ones. Let's look the last year, which is 21-22. Of course, it's focused, partially focused, but partially it's already the reality. So total supply is almost 34 million tons. 90%, 95% of that is domestic production. We consume just only 7.5 million tons, which is something like 24%. The breakdown of internal consumption is 60 to 40% between food consumption and mostly feed for the production for livestock. The rest of 25 million tons should be exported annually. So now we have a very difficult situation when there are still approximately 10 to 15 million tons which were not exported before the Russian invasion started in February, on February 24th. Well, again, this is just graphical depiction of what we discussed. The key figure here is 64% of total grain goes to export. Now, how Ukraine is positioned worldwide in terms of grain exports, well, wheat exports. As you can see from this map, European countries are able to sell 36 million tons of wheat abroad. Ukraine, here it says 10, but because this is the outlook for 22-23. And why it is 3 times less or 2.5 times less? Just because a lot of territory of Ukraine is being occupied by Russian troops. The second reason is that Ukrainian farmers won't be able to produce high yields this year. And the third reason, which is probably one of the most important, because transportation, logistics, and infrastructure capacity is not sufficient in Ukraine because of the blockage of Black Sea ports. Unfortunately, this is a reality, and as we discussed during previous presentation, the unblockage of Black Sea ports is just the only one option. There is no other way how to solve the situation. Over the years, you can see that the share of Ukrainian wheat exports was ranging between 58 to 73%, but on average, it's about 65. Where Ukrainian agricultural exports go to? The key markets for Ukrainian ag products are China, India, Turkey, Egypt. I would mention that Egypt is one of the key buyers of Ukrainian wheat. Turkey is also a very important market for Ukraine. Also, I would mention Arabic countries. Europe, unfortunately, is still one of, well, it is one of the crucial and important markets for Ukraine, but it doesn't play a crucial role yet. Hopefully, with the accession of Ukraine to European family of member countries, the situation probably will change. It will definitely change, but it will take years. As you probably heard that just recently we have granted, or we acquired the status of EU member candidate, and certainly it opens very good prospects for Ukrainian ag products. What actually we sell abroad? 33% of total Ukrainian exports is accounted for corn, then sunflower oil. In fact, you know that Ukraine is #1 sunflower oil exporter worldwide. Wheat is being the third important commodity. Oil cake, soybean, and poultry meat. As to Ukrainian agricultural imports, most of it comes from European countries, EU countries, Poland, Germany. Also, we have imports from USA. And what actually it is? First of all, it's sunflower seed, frozen fish, corn. I think that here we have again corn for seed. I don't think that corn is a commodity. Tobacco, citrus, and other fruits. Let's talk a little bit about geography of Ukrainian wheat exports. Most of it goes to Indonesia, Egypt, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and other countries. Actually, the geography of Ukrainian wheat exports is quite diversified, but mostly we are still exporting to Middle East, to Central and Middle Asia, to African states. The last year, Egypt became #1, Indonesia #2, and you can mention that Turkey bought 10% of the total of Ukrainian exports. There are a number of domestic and international grain exporters from Ukraine. Just to name a few, the names which are very familiar to you, there are Cargill, Louis Dreyfus, ADM, Glencore, Bunge, CHS. And also there are some local companies like Nibelon, which is actually being #1 of exporters of wheat from Ukraine. Nibelon, I think, one of the best cases of domestically grown business from scratch. The company which was able to develop the state-of-the-art grain infrastructure located in the port of Mykolaiv, and also they invested heavily into developing the network of river ports all along the Dnieper River. This is just a good example of local businesses which do a great job developing the grain export potential for Ukraine. This is a logistics map of Ukraine. I think that Roman touched the subject during the previous presentation. Here, the blue dots depict seaports, and basically all of them are blocked. Some of them are already occupied. Some are already demolished and destroyed, like Mariupol. And just to emphasize the importance of Black Sea ports, approximately 70% of total grain exports was going through these seaports. And definitely railway infrastructure is not able to cover even 50% of the total potential which was counted for Black Sea ports. Well, I think that we already talked about that, about the fleet of grain hopper cars, grain transshipment in Ukrainian ports. Just to recall that Chernomorsk seaport is a key grain transshipment terminal for Ukraine, then Mykolaiv seaport, and Pivdennny seaport, which is located not far from Odessa. It's also important to mention the number of grain elevators in Ukraine. As you can see, there is a dramatic change from 1991, when we had just only 30 million ton capacity for grain storage. and now we have 57. But of course, we should understand that out of 57, I think at least 10 or even 15% of the total grain storage capacities are already destroyed by Russians. Because again, most of them were located not far from seaports, which is quite logical. You can see that the number of grain elevators actually tripled from 1991 and up to 1,355 in 2021. So this is really a dramatic change. We have to mention here that the quality of those grain elevators also improved. Basically, those new silos which were built over the recent 10 years, they are based on the recent technologies for grain drying, for grain storing, silos by Brok, by grain processing equipment by Cimbria, and so on. So you can imagine that a large investment was outlaid by Ukrainian businesses, by international investors to develop this network. Okay, so now is the time to switch from numbers and talk a little bit about the farming practices we use here in Ukraine to grow wheat. So I think that this is my favorite part of presentation. Okay, so let's talk about autumn conditions. Last autumn conditions, they were not favorite. We had some good rains in the middle of August, and then we had almost 2 months without any rain. And you can imagine that most of wheat producing regions, they were planting wheat into dry soil, just hoping that the rain will come soon. The rain wasn't coming soon, and until November, or even, well, basically the end of October and the beginning of November. And only then they started to germinate. So the winter wheat was coming into winter wheat untilled, and most of farmers were thinking that probably they won't get anything, especially if winter conditions were not favorable. Typically, we start planting from early September to mid-November. Just to mention that winter wheat accounts for approximately 97% of total wheat production. As I mentioned before, spring wheat is not really popular because, first of all, it always lacks or underperforms in terms of yield as compared to winter wheat, just because of genetic potential, because of the shorter growing period season, and also because in southern and eastern regions, they always lack moisture to develop a good crop. It was until this year, because this year, as Roman already mentioned, a lot of farmers decided to cut corn acres in favor of spring wheat. And that decision was quite obvious. First of all, we were conscious that first of all, we should secure enough food domestically just to feed the nation, then to feed worldwide. And secondly, corn acres are very problematic in terms of economics this year. As you understand, the grain drying costs this year will be extremely high. Moreover, we will probably, we won't probably have enough oil and gas just to dry corn physically. When I was planting my corn, sunflowers, and soybeans this year, I wasn't able just to fill up the tank of my tractor. We were searching for fuel at various locations, buying just small canisters, 20 liters, just several gallons from everywhere. So it's really difficult to predict what will be happening this autumn. Well, we will have to harvest corn and haul somewhere to grain storage. Basically now, all of grain storages are filled up with the crop from the previous season. They are not able to sell it, therefore they are not able to secure the space to accept the new crop which is coming next 3 months, let's say. Another issue is oil and gas, as I mentioned. Grain elevators simply don't have it at all. And we all understand as farmers that the corn is probably it has a chance just to overwinter standing up in the fields. This is basically the disaster, but there is no solution how to deal with this problem. This is the reason why some farmers decided to switch for spring wheat. Okay, this is a picture which is unfortunately very common in southern and eastern part of Ukraine. My friend from Kharkiv, which used to grow super wheat, I would tell you that normally he would harvest at least 160, 170 bushels per acre of winter wheat, even despite he always lacks the moisture in Kharkiv region. This year he was able to plant his acres just only by the end of May, and the reason for that was because Kharkiv was very hot area with very harsh military activities, and his fields were filled with mines, with rockets, and a month was needed just to make it more or less safe to farm his fields. He had to plant his sunflowers just in between the potholes from the mines. That's difficult to imagine, but unfortunately, this is how it looks now. So, winter wheat was planted on 6.5 million hectares as compared to 6.7 million hectares. So you can see that before the invasion, Ukrainian farmers couldn't predict such a horror situation, and it was just a normal planning and normal crop rotation. However, now we have 30% of acres which are actually destroyed, or acres that won't be harvested any longer. some of wheat will probably be standing and just will fall off the heads to the ground. So it's really difficult to predict how much we will harvest this year. But there are some estimates that at least 30% will be lost forever. Yeah, and also I want to emphasize here again that I think that at least 1 million tons of wheat will be just stolen. 600,000 tons is already stolen by Russians. And it's you can
and the total production is up to 20 million, which is 10% of the world production. So 1 million is actually 0.5% of the world total production of wheat. That's huge if you take into consideration the way how it was taken away and how it is handled right now.
Yeah, exactly. And it will disappear forever from the global scale. Okay, so wheat production is estimated at 21.5 million metric tons this year, which is at least minus 23 from the 5-year average and 35% less from previous year. The yield is estimated at 3.68. I think that if converted to bushels per acre, it would be something like 45, 50, something like that, bushels per acre, which is 18% less than the previous crop. But I think that this estimate is even more or less optimistic. I think that the yield drop will be even higher. And the explanation here is very simple. Because of the war, Ukrainian farmers were not able to feed the crop as usual. The second reason, Ukrainian farmers lost approximately 50 to 70% of manpower because tractor operators, the guys who actually were able to run ag machinery, they were first to be called to Ukrainian army to defend Ukraine. In my case, 4 or 5 my tractor operators were called to the army the first day after Russian invasion began. So I was left just only with one. I also had a truck driver, and the truck itself was also called to the army because definitely the army needed transportation capacities to transport people, and of course I gave it for free. It's normal now. And I told that truck driver that if he wants to earn something, he has to learn how to operate the tractor. So he succeeded, and those 2 guys were planting, and I was doing all the spraying and all fertilizer application, because merely there were no any left at the farm to do the job. Okay, so harvested area this year will be contracted by 21% at least. If we look into regional distribution of winter wheat planted area and spring wheat, you can see that unfortunately the most of those regions are in conflict zones. So you can see this red bars. Red depicts regions which are heavily in military activities. like Zaporizhia. Zaporizhia is basically partially already occupied by Russian troops. Kharkiv, Kiev was heavily shelled by missiles and still being shelled. Sumy is constantly attacked by Russian missiles and rockets. Chernihiv, again, is in very risky situation because it borders with Russian Federation. Okay, now let's talk how much seeds we need to plant this year. Total need is estimated at approximately 2.2 million tons. We think that in 2002-2003 marketing year, it can increase to a little bit, let's say 5%. The reason for that is, again, is very simple. I can tell you from my standpoint, I think that the next year we should definitely focus on winter wheat and winter canola, because I'm not sure whether we will be able to plant any corn acres, because corn requires a lot of nitrogen fertilizer. It requires best-in-class farming practice, and it requires, of course, a lot of oil and gas just to dry. In terms of sunflower seeds, I think that many farmers will be focusing on that because it has been always considered as, let's say, rescue crop, because sunflowers always produced the highest possible margin, profit margin for Ukrainian farmers, and probably this year, the next year, Ukrainian farmers will stick to sunflowers as well. But again, there will be a huge lack of processing facilities able to crush the sunflower seeds to produce oil and then to export to European markets. There will be certainly will be the bottleneck. So personally, I feel reluctant about increasing sunflower acres. And also, I'm thinking that the winter wheat sown, planted after soybeans, it will probably benefit from, let's say, nitrogen carryover that soybeans will probably leave in the soil. So even 15 to 20 or 25 pounds per acre of nitrogen after soybeans are considered as a great benefit in terms of growing wheat next year. Okay, so let's move further. So, wheat varieties. We have more than 600 varieties of winter wheat which are registered in Ukraine. Actually, more than practically needed to produce a good crop. 70% of those varieties account for local selection varieties. Foreign selection is the most popular, basically, mostly in northwestern part of Ukraine. The explanation is very simple because northwestern part of Ukraine, from a climatic standpoint, is very similar to Poland, to Eastern Germany. We have moisture, we have more or less mild winter to some extent. So German selection, Czech selection is very popular because all of them are of intensive with a great yield potential. Local selection varieties are very common in regions with insufficient moisture, south and southeast of Ukraine. For example, Veronica Wheat Institute, Plant Breeding and Genetic Institute in Odessa, and other seed genetical centers for growing seeds in Ukraine. I can't tell that Ukrainian genetics actually lags behind German. The German genetics is focused on producing the highest possible yields, but it requires perfect weather conditions. It's not as flexible as Ukrainian genetics. That's why farmers from south and eastern part of Ukraine, they more rely on Ukrainian local genetics. They don't expect winter wheat to produce, let's say, 100 plus bushels per acre. They are okay just only with, let's say, 50 to 60, but they need stability the year over the year. In terms of foreign genetics, we have a bunch of them. This file, which is German, Syngenta, SW Seeds, AWS, which is German again, Limegrain, French, Rajati Genetics, Zatem Union, and so many of them. So Ukrainian farmer, in terms of wheat genetics, is not deprived of choice. We always have a good choice, and normally seed genetic companies are chasing Ukrainian farmers to sell. In terms of wheat quality parameters, they're more or less standard. I will focus just only on two parameters, which is moisture, which should be 14, not more than 14%, and protein content, ranging from 10.5, which is for fodder purposes, up to 14, which is required by first class for flour industry. Durum wheat doesn't. There is a similarity. The only peculiarity is that 0.5% moisture more than soft wheat. As to the prices of Ukrainian grain, it used to be high, ranging from 300 to 320 on FOB basis at the Black Sea port, but it was until the Russian invasion. Yeah, from this table you can see that basically feed wheat at Ukrainian Black Sea port was priced more or less in line with the prices at the global markets. The only difference was explained just by logistics, which was $15 to $25 per metric ton. And now you probably remember the number of $180 per ton. Just imagine that logistical component increased in price 10 times, at least 10 times.
So therefore, the only way to make it economically viable for selling it abroad is stealing, just like Russians are doing, unfortunately.
Yeah, exactly. So you can see that once Russian murderers stepped on Ukrainian land, the price of grain hiked up to 340 from 300, because the world realized that it will be deprived of very large amount of Ukrainian feed. And basically this price is still holding at 340, 360, depending on the location. But internal price, ex-works price, which is paid to Ukrainian farmer, nowadays is ranging from 100 to $120 per metric tons. Just imagine the difference. Usually Ukrainian farmers use sunflower as previous crop for winter wheat in southeastern part of Ukraine. To be honest, I do the same. I have a lot of sunflower acreages, and after sunflowers, there are only basically two options: winter wheat or corn, because in soybeans you would never be able to combat the volunteer sunflower crop. We use a number of plants and equipment. Oh, sorry, that's about the tillage. So, unfortunately, a big portion of Ukrainian acres are still being plowed. After sunflower and soybeans, we usually do minimum tillage. In terms of planting equipment, we use basically the same equipment which is used by European farmers, like Oettinger, Horsch, Lenkin, Kuhn, Waderstadt, Great Plains from US. We normally start from the mid of September and try to finish planting by the end of October. Row spacing ranges from 7.5 to 25 centimeters, and planting population ranges from 1 to 5.5 million seeds, depending on the region and depending on the planting date. As to nitrogen, normally we put more nitrogen in the western and northern parts of Ukraine because of the moisture, and less nitrogen in central and southern parts. Fungicide timing, again, it all depends on the region, but normally northwestern part of Ukraine does at least 2 or even 3 passes with fungicides. The first is done during tillering, early spring, to prevent powdery mildew, leaf septorians, and lodging of stem. Then the second comes during the booting stage, then at the heading, and then at the flowering. In southern regions, they can do just only 1 pass or 2 in exceptionally wet years. As to the economics of growing wheat in Ukraine, I won't go. I don't want to spend a lot of time on going through these numbers. We can go through them after the presentation. But the only figure I want to tell you is that normally the gross profit is something like 900 to 1,000 US dollars per hectare. This number doesn't account for fixed cost. That's only after seed, fertilizer, and pesticides cost. So this is a good chart which explains that which crops produced the highest margin for Ukrainian farmers. As I already mentioned, sunflower seed is unbeatable, number 1. Grape seeds are number 2. Soybeans and corn share number 3. Then wheat and barley. I think we already talked about that, so no need to stop on that. Okay, so this is the end of the presentation, and I see that there are only 3 of us left.
No problem. We have, first of all, I've had phone calls right after you started presenting that people needed to go, but they will definitely check it on the YouTube. Thank you for the thorough analysis, and it's most important even that you were able to provide analysis from the standpoint of the actual producer. And we will be waiting for the audience's feedback so that for the next bi-weekly, which is in 2 weeks, we would prepare more, so to say, adequate information if there was something that the audience didn't like this time. However, my personal subjective point of view is, although just like usual with our sessions, although it is long, however, it is very informative, and it will bring more adequate reaction later on rather than in the live video, because people get tired. Thank you once again. Good luck in the fields, and in the second, but yeah, I see it. So you've always been involved in this charity Bayraktar purchases. I bet soon Bayraktar will be used in agriculture as well. I think that being the second battlefield, agricultural fields will deserve Bayraktar's attention too.
That's for sure.
After the war. And Pritula will be collecting money for the agricultural usage of Bayraktars. Thank you once again, everyone. And separately, I would like to say thank you to the team of Travelite who are working on this project, preparing and the information and staying strong in this situation. Also, many thanks to our partners in the United States, in Great Britain, in Europe, New Zealand, and throughout the world for spreading the word about our program and supporting Ukraine and praying for Ukraine. We will be proceeding with the updates and with fine-tuning the information. Meanwhile, good luck to everyone, and may God never bring the conditions of life that we, the Ukrainians, are living through right now to any other countries worldwide. Thank you, everybody.
Slava Ukraine.
Героям слава.
Героям слава.
Glory to Ukraine.
Glory to everyone, to all the allies, and to every agricultural producer worldwide.